So I want you to imagine a martial arts match for a second.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
But this one ends in a literal, fatal, bone-crushing stomp right in front of an emperor.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's intense.
Right. And the craziest part is the victor doesn't go to prison for this. He is actually enshrined as a living god.
That is just wild to think about.
It really is. And, when you picture sumo today, you probably see something vastly different than that.
Oh, absolutely. You probably envision this very tourist-friendly spectacle, right?
Exactly. Like two really heavy guys in silk loincloths throwing salt around.
Yeah, and they just kind of crash into each other on a clay ring while an audience politely applauds.
All right. It feels like this quaint cultural relic, like just something you check off a list while visiting Tokyo.
Right, but beneath that sanitized image is a reality that is, honestly, almost unfathomable.
It really is. And the documents, the translation guides, and all the martial arts analyses we've poured over for today's deep dive, they reveal a completely different story.
They absolutely do.
They show that sumo is arguably the most violently explosive martial art on Earth.
Without a doubt.
I mean, it's a practice that began with literal fights to the death.
Right.
Evolved into a sacred Shinto ritual that has barely changed in centuries.
Yeah, and then it eventually served as this desperate geopolitical weapon, used to project national strength against heavily armed Western navies. The duality of sumo is really what makes it such a fascinating subject of study.
For sure.
Because we're so conditioned by modern sports broadcasting to view it purely as an athletic competition.
Like just another sport on TV.
Exactly. But to understand the sheer terrifying physiology of these athletes and the history they carry, we have to recognize that sumo isn't fundamentally a sport at all.
Right, it's something else entirely.
It is a living, breathing religious ritual.
Which is just so fascinating.
It really is. The violent mechanics of the sport, that incredibly dense muscle hidden beneath the cultivated layer of fat, it's all engineered for a very specific purpose that dates back to ancient Japan.
And we are talking about a time long before the samurai class even existed, right?
Oh, yeah. Long before the iconic katana was ever forged.
Wow.
This was an era where the human body itself was the ultimate weapon.
And physical strength was basically absolute justice.
Exactly. Strength was the law.
So getting into the mythological origins detailed in these historical texts, it's honestly incredibly brutal.
Oh, it's shockingly violent.
We are looking at an era where a bout was called tigoi.
Tigoi, right.
And it wasn't this grappling-only match that we know today.
Not at all.
The texts describe a bare-handed fight for survival, like featuring striking, kicking, and literally bone-breaking joint locks.
Yeah, the absolute bedrock of this martial history centers on a very specific duel.
Right.
It took place in the imperial court between two men, Nomi no Sukune and Taima no Kihaya.
And that duel basically sets the precedent for everything that follows in sumo history, right?
It does. It absolutely does. Because according to the ancient chronicles, Kihaya was this man of legendary, terrifying strength.
Like a mythological giant, almost.
Exactly. And he boasted that no one in the land could defeat him. So the emperor, he summoned Nomi no Sukune to challenge him.
And when they clash, I mean, it's not like modern sumo. There was no ring, right?
Right. No ring, no rules.
No referee to jump in and stop the fight.
Exactly. The text described this totally savage exchange of strikes.
Yeah, and it culminated in Sukune kicking Kihaya with such insane force that he completely shattered his ribs.
Which is horrifying on its own.
Right, but it gets worse. As Kihaya falls to the ground, Sukune delivers a fatal, just crushing stomp to his lower back.
Yeah, essentially breaking his spine and killing him right on the spot.
Just absolutely brutal. And rather than being horrified by a murder in his court, the emperor actually rewards Sukune.
Yeah, he gives him lamb.
Right, and he deifies him. He becomes enshrined as the literal god of sumo.
Which you can still see today, right?
Yeah, you can actually visit a quiet, unassuming shrine dedicated to Nomi no Sukune today. It's just a short walk from the massive modern sumo arena in Ryogoku.
That's so wild to think about. But, that level of lethality presented a massive problem for the imperial court going forward.
I can imagine.
Yeah, because of the sheer violence of that tigoi style, a subsequent imperial decree had to happen. And it fundamentally altered the trajectory of Japanese martial arts.
Because they couldn't just have guys getting murdered in the courtyard every week.
Exactly. So the emperor outright banned striking, kicking, thrusting, and punching from the practice.
Which is huge. That ban basically forced a radical biomechanical shift.
Oh, totally. By stripping away all the percussive strikes, practitioners were left with literally no choice but to rely entirely on grappling.
Right, throwing, unbalancing their opponents, that sort of thing.
Exactly. This imperial decree effectively created the grappling-only foundation of modern sumo that we see today.
Wow.
But the rationale behind this ban wasn't merely, a modern concept of athlete safety. It wasn't about concussions.
Right, they didn't care about sports medicine back then.
Right. It was entirely about imperial decorum.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, having men bleed to death or suffer these compound fractures in the presence of the emperor. It disrupted the sacred purity of the court.
That is so wild to think about. Like, if the emperor steps in and bans strikes because they are simply too lethal, that essentially makes modern sumo a restricted version of a deadly combat art.
That's a great way to look at it, yeah.
I mean, watching sumo is kind of like watching a Formula One race where the officials decided the engines were too dangerous.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right, so they just slap speed limiters on all the cars.
Yeah.
You are watching a machine capable of horrific violence, but it's deliberately constrained by a rigid set of rules.
Yeah, the machinery is constrained, but the violence isn't entirely gone,
Right.
It has simply been redirected into a religious framework.
Which is where the Shinto stuff comes in.
Exactly. The continuation of Sumo, even in its restricted grappling form, was allowed because it was so deeply intertwined with Shinto animism.
Okay, can you break that down for us, like the animism part?
Sure, so in Shinto, gods or spirits, they're called the kami. They exist in all things in nature.
Like mountains and rivers?
Right, mountains, rivers, the wind. And these kami possess this very complex duality.
Okay.
They have a tranquil, nurturing aspect, but they also harbor an Aramitama.
Aramitama, what is that exactly?
It's a violently raging, destructive aspect
Mm.
that can cause typhoons, earthquakes, and famine.
Wow, okay. So they are terrifyingly powerful.
Right. So sumo became a ritual offering designed specifically to appease these destructive spirits.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
The immense physical struggle of the wrestlers is quite literally a prayer for an abundant harvest.
That reframes the entire pre-match ritual for me.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the handfuls of salt the wrestlers throw into the ring before a bout. They aren't just doing that for theatrical flair.
Not at all. In Shinto, salt is a purifying agent.
Right.
It's used to cleanse spaces of spiritual pollution, which historically included the pollution of blood and death.
Oh, wow. So the clay ring, the dohyo, it literally becomes a sacred, purified realm through that salt. And those iconic heavy stomps, right? The Shiko.
Yes, the Shiko.
Where a wrestler lifts one massive leg high into the air and just slams it down onto the clay. That takes on a much darker meaning when you connect it back to Nomi no Sukune.
The connection there is so direct and visceral.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, while the Shiko serves as a biomechanical warm-up, stretching the hips and preparing the lower body for explosive output.
Right, like an athlete stretching.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But its primary purpose is spiritual warfare.
Spiritual warfare. That is such a heady phrase.
Well, it fits. The heavy stomps are designed to physically crush malevolent, evil spirits that they believe dwell deep within the earth.
So they are literally stomping down demons to ensure the ground remains pure and the crops will grow.
Exactly. The extreme violence of Sukune's fatal stomp on a human spine, it was transmuted into a ritual stomp on the forces of nature itself.
That is just wow. But the emperor's ban on strikes created this huge unintended consequence, didn't it?
It really did.
Because sumo was no longer a bloody death match, it eventually became safe and acceptable for the broader public to watch.
Right, it became a spectator event.
Yeah. And as Japan moved out of an era of constant warfare and entered the prolonged, enforced peace of the Edo period under the Tokugawa shogunate.
When the samurai weren't fighting on battlefields anymore.
Exactly. Martial arts had to adapt to survive. And sumo found a highly lucrative new home completely outside the imperial court.
Yeah, it evolved into something called Kunjin Sumo.
Which translates to fundraising sumo, right?
Yes, fundraising sumo. Because the peace of the Edo period brought about significant urbanization.
Right, cities are growing.
And you see the rise of a very powerful merchant and Commodore class.
So people actually have some disposable income for entertainment.
Precisely. And shrines and temples, which constantly needed capital for roof repairs or expansions or just maintaining their sprawling grounds.
They realized they possessed a highly marketable asset.
Exactly. They began hosting massive ticketed sumo tournaments within their precincts.
So the religious ritual was basically systematically commercialized into mass urban entertainment.
That's exactly what happened.
And the sources pinpoint Tomioka Hachiman Shrine in Tokyo as the 1684 birthplace of Edo Kanjin Sumo.
Right. That is essentially the origin point of professional sumo as an industry.
Wow. And soon after, Ikoen Temple in the Ryogoku district became the absolute epicenter.
Yeah, and Ryogoku is still known today as the town of sumo.
Right. Just imagine the atmosphere of Edo period Ryogoku for a second.
It must have been incredible.
I mean, the smells of street food, the dense crowds of commoners, these massive temporary wooden arenas built by temple carpenters.
All surrounding this purified clay ring where giants clashed. There was a whole ecosystem.
And this environment actually fostered a parallel culture of physical strength among the commoners that heavily mirrored sumo, didn't it?
It absolutely did. Long before modern powerlifting or, engineered barbells, ordinary Japanese citizens tested their absolute physical limits
Right.
through a phenomenon known as chikara ishi, or strength stones.
Okay, this part of the deep dive blew my mind because the baseline for human strength among commoners in the Edo period was already staggering.
Oh, completely. The texts emphasize that manual labor was the absolute foundation of the economy then.
Right. Men and women working in agriculture, shipping, trade, they routinely handled 60-kilogram sacks of rice.
Which is over 130 pounds.
Yeah, over 130 pounds, just as a basic requirement of their daily jobs.
Your physical strength was literally your resume. It dictated your wages.
That's wild. So when a population is routinely performing that level of heavy labor every single day?
Their concept of a recreational feat of strength becomes quite extreme.
I would imagine. So what did they do for fun, exactly?
Well, they would gather at local shrines and lift massive, smooth, oval-shaped river stones.
Just giant rocks.
Just giant rocks. And lifting an unknurled, asymmetrical 100-kilogram river stone requires an entirely different kinetic chain than lifting a nice, balanced Olympic barbell today.
Right, because there's nowhere to grab it.
Exactly. The lifter has to fight the stone's shifting center of gravity. They rely heavily on insane grip strength, huge hip drive, and really deep core stabilization.
And the sources highlight a legendary figure in this strongman subculture named Sonomiya Unosuke, right?
Yes. Unosuke is a fascinating historical figure.
Yeah, the historical texts note he was actually a physically weak child who was bullied because he couldn't lift the stones the other local kids were lifting.
Right, a classic underdog story.
Totally. And he supposedly trained in secret for years.
And it paid off.
Big time.
Yeah.
By 1831, as an adult, he entered a strength competition at a shrine in Koshigaya City.
Right.
And he successfully lifted a stone weighing 187 kilograms.
Which is over 410 pounds.
That is just, it's over 410 pounds of smooth, awkward, dead weight. I can't even wrap my head around that.
It's incredible. And Unosuke's feat was so remarkable that he actually formed a touring troupe to perform these lifts across the country.
Wow, like a traveling strongman circus.
Exactly. And what reveals the profound cultural impact of sumo here is that these amateur strongman competitions completely adopted the infrastructure of professional sumo.
Wait, really? Like the rankings and everything?
Yes, they use the Banzuki system.
Okay, what is that again?
It's the official, highly stylized ranking table used to organize professional sumo wrestlers.
Oh, right.
The man who lifted the heaviest stone was awarded the rank of yokozuna or ozeki of the strength stones.
That is amazing. So sumo had permeated the psychology of the Japanese commoner so deeply that its terminology was basically the undisputed gold standard for human power.
It was the ultimate cultural touchstone for strength.
But, the commodification of a sacred Shinto ritual into a ticketed fundraising spectacle and an amateur strongman league, it raises a pretty massive structural question for me. How does a religious practice survive complete commercialization without totally losing its connection to the gods?
That's a really great point. And the answer is that the religious elements were never discarded.
Really? They didn't just fade out?
No, they were institutionalized to legitimize the commercial enterprise.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, if you visit Tomioka Hachiman Shrine today, you will see the Yokozuna Rikishi Monument.
Okay.
It is this massive stone structure engraved with the names of past grand champions, situated directly on sacred temple grounds.
So it's literally etched in stone on holy ground.
Exactly. To this day, before a major tournament, the highest-ranking wrestlers travel to the shrine to perform ceremonial ring-entering rituals.
Wow.
They are dedicating their physical forms and their movements directly to the kami.
So the human audience is simply paying for the privilege to witness an offering to the divine.
That is exactly how it's framed, yes.
It's kind of as if the NFL Super Bowl was fundamentally understood by everyone in the stadium to be a literal religious offering to the gods of the harvest.
Huh.
And the billion-dollar broadcast rights were just a convenient financial byproduct that kept the stadiums running.
That is a remarkably accurate analogy, honestly. The core mechanic, the offering of immense cultivated human power to the divine, it all remains completely intact.
And this intense cultivation of physical power, tied directly to Japanese spirituality, it actually positions sumo to become a crucial psychological tool during one of the most terrifying moments in Japanese history.
Oh, absolutely. The internal strength cultivated in the rings of Edo was suddenly forced to confront a massive external threat.
We're talking about the 1850s now.
Right. In 1853 and 1854, the strict policy of national seclusion that Japan had maintained for centuries was completely shattered.
Yeah, this is when Commodore Matthew C. Perry of the United States Navy sails into Edo Bay.
With heavily armed, steam-powered warships, the famous Black Ships.
Reading the accounts of Perry's arrival, the sheer panic of the Tokugawa shogunate is just palpable.
Oh, they were terrified.
I mean, the Japanese public had never seen anything remotely resembling these massive industrial warships, which were bristling with explosive shell-firing cannons.
Yeah. And the shogunate realizes very, very quickly that their centuries of sword-based martial arts and coastal defenses are entirely obsolete.
Like bringing a knife to a gunfight, but on a national scale.
Precisely. They were defenseless against Western naval artillery. The public is terrified and deeply humiliated by the realization that they are staring down the barrel of overwhelming industrial power.
So during the tense treaty negotiations in 1854, the shogunate was obviously desperate to project some form of strength to avoid appearing completely helpless.
They had to do something. They couldn't match the Americans in metallurgy or ballistics, right?
Right.
So they fell back on their ultimate symbol of biological power, the sumo wrestlers.
The Tokugawa records detail that dozens of high-ranking sumo wrestlers were dispatched to Yokohama.
Right.
Ostensibly, they were sent to perform heavy labor, like carrying massive bales of rice and huge loads of diplomatic gifts for the Americans.
But it was a highly calculated diplomatic maneuver.
Oh, a total flex.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
The shogunate wanted the American sailors to watch these 150-kilogram giants effortlessly tossing 60-kilo rice bales around as if they were couch cushions.
The message was loud and clear. Our technology might be behind, but our men are literal biological tanks.
Exactly. And the historical record diverges wildly at this exact point regarding what happened next between the wrestlers and the sailors.
Okay, yeah, this is where it gets crazy.
It does. According to the Japanese accounts, this display of heavy lifting naturally provoked the American sailors.
Right, because a lot of these sailors had backgrounds in boxing and catch wrestling, didn't they?
They did. So the Japanese texts claim that the Americans actually challenged the sumo wrestlers to direct combat.
Like an impromptu MMA match in the 1850s.
Basically, yeah. Specific names are recorded, such as Ozeki Koyanagi Tsunekichi and another powerful wrestler named Shiramayumi.
The Japanese narrative of this sounds straight out of a martial arts film.
It really does.
It claims that more than a dozen American sailors stepped onto the training area one after another.
Right.
Shiramayumi supposedly absorbed a few bare-knuckle punches, got a bloody nose, but then easily overpowered the sailors with just overwhelming grappling technique.
And then the Ozeki Koyanagi allegedly dispatched 3 sailors in rapid succession.
Just throwing them into the dirt while the Japanese crowd goes absolutely wild.
Right, roaring in approval. And the legend expanded rapidly as more foreigners entered the newly opened treaty ports.
Oh, it didn't stop there.
No. There are accounts from 1861 claiming a British man challenged a wrestler during an exhibition and was immediately rendered unconscious by a barrage of headbutts and thrusting strikes.
A barrage of headbutts, that is insane. But the most visually enduring myth from this era also comes from 1861, right?
Yes. It involves a French sailor described as a 240-centimeter tall giant.
Which is nearly 8 feet tall.
Exactly.
And the sources mention a specific smaller Japanese wrestler named Ryogoku, who supposedly faced down this literal 8-foot Frenchman. Biomechanically, for a significantly smaller grappler to throw someone with that extreme of a height advantage, they have to completely manipulate leverage.
Oh, it's incredibly complex.
Yeah, they have to drop their hips below the giant center of gravity, secure a deep underhook or belt grip, and use the taller man's massive upper body weight against him.
Essentially turning his height into a fulcrum.
Exactly. And this miraculous throw was immortalized in a famous, highly circulated woodblock print.
Yes, titled The Pride of Yokohama Wrestlers.
But we have to ask, did any of this actually happen?
Right, so the biomechanics of such a throw are plausible in a controlled environment, but we must rigorously question the historical reality of these events.
Because the American records tell a very different story, don't they?
You really do. When we cross-reference the Japanese accounts with the official American logs, specifically the comprehensive narrative of the expedition of an American squadron compiled by Perry's command,
Yeah.
these sequential humiliating defeats of American sailors simply do not exist.
Wow, so they just made it up.
Well, the American records note the sumo exhibitions with mild anthropological curiosity, but there is zero mention of an international brawl where their men were systematically crushed.
So if the American military logs don't corroborate a massive brawl, then the Japanese media of the time was basically fabricating the narrative to serve a specific purpose.
Exactly. The public consumed this news through koaraban, which were early, highly sensationalized news sheets printed from clay or wood blocks.
Like the 1850s version of a tabloid.
Precisely. And the koaraban publishers knew exactly what their terrified, humiliated audience wanted to read.
Because the Japanese public was experiencing an acute psychological crisis.
Oh, completely. The koaraban provided a vital coping mechanism.
That makes total sense.
By exaggerating or outright inventing these crushing physical victories over the foreign invaders, the media gave the common people a sense of exhilaration and defiance.
Which directly fueled the Sono Joy movement, right?
Yes. The political philosophy of revere the emperor, expel the barbarians.
Okay, so let me get this straight. The government meant the rice-carrying exhibition as a polite but intimidating display of logistics.
Right?
But the local tabloids weaponized it into a decisive military victory for national morale.
That is exactly what happened.
That's like hosting a friendly cultural exchange and the local papers reporting it as a decisive military victory.
It really is. The public projected all of their geopolitical anxiety directly onto the bodies of the sumo wrestlers.
The Rikishi were no longer just athletes or religious figures then.
No, they became avatars of national dignity. They physically represented a Japan that refused to yield to the industrial might of the West.
That intense fusion of nationalism, physical power, and divine ritual carried sumo into the 20th century.
It did. But the role of the sumo wrestler would radically shift again.
Right, because the geopolitical posturing of the Edo and Meiji periods eventually gives way to the horrific realities of World War II.
Exactly. We transition from the psychological threat of foreign ships to the literal physical destruction of the Japanese homeland.
The sources outline the devastating impact of the 1945 Tokyo firebombings.
Yes, the incendiary raids.
The city was subjected to relentless raids that incinerated vast swaths of wooden architecture.
It was complete devastation.
And much of Sumida Ward, including Ryogoku, the absolute heart of the sumo world, was burned entirely to the ground.
The sumo stables, the heya, the shopping streets, the infrastructure, all of it vanished into ash.
The survival of sumo during this period is honestly a logistical miracle when you think about it.
Oh, without a doubt. Sumo requires a massive caloric surplus.
Right. Wrestlers historically consume highly caloric shonkonabe stews to build that vital layer of fat over the dense muscle, right?
Yes, to lower their center of gravity.
But maintaining a daily intake of 7,000 to 10,000 calories during the severe food rationing and black market economics of wartime Japan, that's nearly impossible.
It was impossible. Wrestlers suffered from severe malnutrition and their average body weights dropped significantly.
But the really poignant detail hidden in these texts is how the town of Sumo actually came back.
Yeah, this part is amazing.
It wasn't just rebuilt by government contractors. The sumo wrestlers themselves, despite the utter lack of food, personally engaged in the brutal manual labor of clearing the charred rubble.
Right. The giant men the public had worshipped as avatars of national defense were now physically pulling charred beams out of the dirt to rebuild their sacred town from the ground up.
The bodies that had served as symbols of national pride were literally repurposed as the engines of reconstruction.
And as the physical town of Ryogoku slowly reemerged from the ashes, the global stature and the athletic reality of the sport entered its most highly evolved era.
Stripping away the complex history for a moment, the mechanics of modern sumo are an absolute marvel of physics.
Oh, they really are.
We are observing 150-kilogram men over 330 pounds reaching maximum physical output in a fraction of a second.
It's explosive.
And the rules dictating this output are brilliantly minimalist yet brutally unforgiving.
Very true.
A wrestler must either force his opponent entirely out of the 4.55-meter ring, or force any part of the opponent's body, other than the soles of their feet, to touch the clay.
Right. It is the distillation of combat to its absolute purest kinetic form.
There are no ropes to bounce against for momentum.
Nope.
There is no cage to lean on to rest.
Exactly. From the tachi-ai, the explosive initial charge, where both men leap from a squatted position, the match is just a collision of blinding speed, devastating forward pressure, and highly refined leverage.
And most matches are over in a blink, right?
Yeah, the vast majority of matches are decided in less than 10 seconds.
The sources highlight specific matchups that perfectly illustrate how technique and specialized muscle can overcome sheer mass.
Oh, Chiyonafuji is the perfect example here.
Yes, one of the most legendary figures. He was a yokozuna who looked entirely different from a stereotypical sumo wrestler.
He really did. He was heavily muscled, incredibly lean, and often weighed around 120 kilograms, which is quite light for the sport.
And he routinely faced off against Konishiki, right?
Yes. Konishiki was a massive Hawaiian-born wrestler who weighed well over 270 kilograms.
Which is more than 600 pounds at his peak.
Exactly.
The size disadvantage Chiyonafuji faced was astronomical. In almost any other combat sport, a weight discrepancy of over 300 pounds would be completely insurmountable.
Oh, it would be a death sentence. But Chiyonafuji utilized a specific grip on the mawashi, the belt.
Right.
He dropped his hips to establish a much lower center of gravity, and he used Konishiki's immense forward momentum against him.
That is just brilliant.
He defeated the giant head-on, proving that the sumo physique isn't just about accumulating mass.
Right. It is a hyper-specialized engine designed for optimal leverage and explosive force.
Exactly. And, Konishiki's career also marks a massive cultural shift in the sport.
Oh, for sure. He was part of a wave of foreign-born titans who traveled to Japan and eventually dominated the upper echelons of sumo in the late 20th century.
Right. We saw Hawaiian-born athletes like Akebono and Musashimaru not only compete, but reach the absolute pinnacle, the divine immortal rank of yokozuna.
And when a lower-ranked wrestler manages to achieve a miraculous upset victory over a reigning yokozuna, the usually reserved Japanese crowd completely erupts.
It's pandemonium.
The sources describe the tradition of fans throwing their zabuton, their sitting cushions, right into the ring.
Yeah, creating this chaotic blizzard of flying pillows to celebrate the impossible. It's an amazing sight.
But the ascension of these foreign-born athletes, it forces a profound reevaluation of that nationalist narrative established during the arrival of the black ships, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Because in the 1850s, the shogunate and the media utilized sumo wrestlers as biological proof of Japanese superiority over foreigners.
Right. They were the physical embodiment of the mandate to expel the barbarians.
Exactly. But a century later, athletes from Hawaii and eventually Mongolia are proving that the divine strength of the dohyo is not bound by genetics or bloodline.
So if a foreign-born athlete can endure the brutal hierarchical lifestyle of a sumo stable,
which is famously grueling.
right, and if they master the complex biomechanics of the sport and pay the proper respect to the Shinto rituals,
the gods of the ring do not care what passport they hold.
They can ascend to the rank of a living deity.
Exactly.
But this influx of massive, explosive athletes like Akebono in the 1990s leads directly to the biggest debate surrounding sumo today.
The MMA debate.
Yes. If this sport creates such unstoppable, incredibly strong titans, why do they seem to fail so spectacularly when they leave the sacred clay ring and enter a modern mixed martial arts cage?
Right. The perception that sumo is weak in a real fight is a highly publicized criticism.
Yeah, I've heard that so many times.
And it largely stems from a few high-profile disasters in the early 2000s. To really analyze this, we have to look closely at the tragic transition of Akebono into modern combat sports like K1 kickboxing and MMA.
Akabono's foray into MMA was honestly brutal to
It
witness.
is painful.
Here is a legendary Yokozuna, a man revered as a literal god of strength, and the statistics laid out in the sources are just grim.
Very grim.
He went 0-4 in MMA and 1-10 in professional kickboxing.
Yeah.
His fight against the massive former NFL player Bob Sapp on New Year's Eve 2003 was a massive cultural phenomenon, though.
Oh, it drew some of the highest television ratings in Japanese history.
The entire nation tuned in to see their Yokozuna dominate this foreign invader.
And instead, they watched him gas out quickly and suffer a devastating knockout.
Right. The visual of a Yokozuna lying unconscious on the canvas caused a massive public recalibration of sumo's effectiveness.
It really shook people. But if we deconstruct this failure using biology and economics, the myth that sumo lacks martial validity completely falls apart.
Okay, let's break that down. Let's start with the biological specialization.
Sure. A sumo wrestler's body is exclusively engineered for a very specific energy output.
Right.
They are training for an explosive burst that lasts, on average, 5 to 10 seconds.
Just absolute maximum power for a few seconds.
Exactly. Biologically, they are relying entirely on the ATP-CP system.
The ATP-CP system, what is that?
Adenosine triphosphate and creatine phosphate. It provides an instantaneous reserve of maximal explosive energy stored directly within the muscle tissue.
So it's like nitro for a car.
Exactly.
Yep.
It allows a 150-kilogram man to generate the force of a car crash from a dead stop.
Wow.
But that specific fuel tank is entirely empty after about 15 seconds.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And a modern MMA fight or a kickboxing match consists of 3 to 5 rounds lasting up to 5 minutes each.
So 15 to 25 minutes of fighting.
Right. It requires highly developed aerobic and anaerobic endurance. A massive sumo physique is fundamentally biologically incapable of sustaining oxygenated output for 15 minutes of continuous combat.
It totally makes sense when you put it like that. Judging a sumo wrestler's fighting ability based on a 3-round MMA fight is basically like taking a top-fuel dragster.
That's a perfect analogy.
A machine meticulously engineered to explode in a straight line and cross a finish line in exactly 4 seconds and forcing it to race in the 24-hour Le Mans endurance race.
Exactly. When the engine violently explodes on the second lap, you don't blame the dragster for being weak, right?
Right. You acknowledge that it was forced to operate in the entirely wrong kinetic environment.
Exactly. And that biological reality is compounded by the harsh economics of the combat sports industry in Japan.
The money side of things.
Right. Sumo is an incredibly lucrative profession. Once a wrestler achieves the salaried ranks of Juryo, and certainly when they reach Ozeki or Yokozuna, they are compensated exceptionally well.
Through salaries, tournament prizes, and massive corporate sponsorships.
Precisely.
Which means a sumo wrestler in his mid-20s, in his absolute athletic prime, with healthy knees and explosive speed, he has literally zero financial incentive to leave the stable.
None whatsoever. Why would he leave to learn submission defense and get punched in the face inside a steel cage?
Right. The money and the prestige are keeping him right there on the clay.
Precisely why the wrestlers who do transition to MMA are almost universally past their athletic prime.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Akabono was in his mid-30s when he fought Bob Sapp. He had already retired from sumo because years of carrying 200 kilograms on his frame, combined with the brutal daily training on hard clay, had completely destroyed his knees.
So he was already physically compromised before he even stepped in the ring.
Exactly. And when these retired wrestlers enter MMA, promoters want to immediately capitalize on their massive domestic fame.
They want the big money fights right away.
Right. They don't give them 2 years of quiet training and low-level warm-up fights to learn striking, defense, and jiu-jitsu.
They throw them immediately into the ring with elite world-class heavyweight strikers.
Yes. They are old, structurally broken down, fighting entirely outside of their metabolic energy system against men who have trained their whole lives to fight for 15 minutes.
Of course they lose.
Of course. This leads the analysts in the texts to pose a really fascinating hypothetical.
What's the hypothetical?
What if a younger, lower-ranked sumo powerhouse, someone hovering around 110 kilos, incredibly explosive, in his absolute physical prime at, say, 24 years old, decided to leave sumo and train specifically for MMA for 3 years?
Oh, wow.
The underlying mechanics of sumo, the unbreakable base, the complex grip fighting, the devastating hip leverage, and the explosive forward pressure.
All of that would logically translate into a terrifying MMA grappler if properly adapted to a longer time horizon.
Exactly. It is a compelling what-if scenario that highlights the true martial potential of the art.
But I will probably never see it.
Unlikely, because the cultural and economic architecture of the Japan Sumo Association is meticulously designed to ensure their best athletes never ever leave the dosha.
The deeper we look into the stack of sources, the more the tourist-friendly image of sumo just completely dissolves.
It really does.
We have traced this practice from a mythical death match with a fatal spine-crushing stomp to commoners lifting 400-pound river stones for bragging rights.
Right.
We've seen how the shogunate weaponized the bodies of wrestlers as psychological propaganda against Western navies.
And how those same bodies cleared the charred rubble of World War II.
Yeah, and how the sport evolved into a hyper-specialized athletic marvel that defies standard combat sports logic.
The evolution is staggering, yet the core remains totally untouched.
It really does.
And this brings us to a final consideration, something that recontextualizes the modern debate over sumo's relevance in the age of mixed martial arts.
Okay, lay it on us.
Well, we just analyzed all the biological and economic reasons why sumo wrestlers fail when forced to adapt to the rules of an MMA cage. They struggle when removed from their native environment.
Right.
But perhaps sumo's rigid, stubborn refusal to adapt its ancient Shinto rules is the exact mechanism that has allowed it to survive the centuries.
Oh, that is a fascinating thought.
Right. Look at the landscape of modern combat sports. Olympic judo, taekwondo, even modern kickboxing rule sets, they are constantly being scientifically optimized, homogenized, and sanitized to appeal to global television audiences and international committees.
Yeah, they constantly change the rules to make it more TV-friendly.
Exactly. And they frequently lose their distinct cultural identity in the relentless pursuit of mass market appeal and faster broadcasting times.
But sumo just completely refuses to compromise.
Exactly. It demands that the modern world wait while a 150-kilogram man meticulously purifies the air with salt.
I love that.
It demands that we watch the stamping of evil spirits into the earth before a single technique is thrown. In a world obsessed with optimizing violence for a steel cage, sumo's greatest strength isn't its applicability in a street fight.
Right.
Its greatest strength is its beautiful insistence on remaining exactly what it was meant to be. A sacred ritual tied to the earth, offering sweat and immense physical power to the gods, entirely unbothered by the demands of the modern era.
That is perfectly said. So, to you listening, the next time you see a clip of two giants crashing together on a clay ring, look past the exotic spectacle. Look at the salt being thrown. Look at the mechanics of the stomp. They aren't just athletes competing for a trophy, they are maintaining a living mythology. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the history and power of sumo. We will see you next time.